We're
going
ready to
to
start.
launch my recording. I'm going to tab back in, make sure like everyone can see it, right? We good?
Yes.
We're checking recording. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So, I am here to talk to you about colors. Also, I am alt tabbed and don't have multiple screens, so if anyone has questions,
Yeah,
officers,
we got
yell
you.
at me.
We got you.
Thanks.
Yes, we got you.
So, everyone, let's board the color train because I'm going. All right. So you may be sitting there and you might be thinking, "Gee, coloring my stuff is intimidating." And you may be unsure how to like choose color palettes, or you might notice that like for me, I only work in honestly like green, reds, and blues or teals for some reason. Oh, mouse, stop. Oh, what's happening? All right. So I am here to hopefully clarify and help you figure out your color palettes and color usage. So, our first things we're gonna look at is value based and color based. So I'll clarify kind of like what the difference is as we go through. They are kind of informed from each other. So to start out, value based is honestly what we learn for most of our illustration career or school here at SCAD. So these are illustrations that rely on grayscale to set up your focal points. So like your greatest contrast will be your focal point, which is created by usually a white and then heavy blacks or darker values. Um, these are mostly used because they quickly create a good read on what your focal point is. But this can also be used for things like characters, which I will. Mouse, can you stop? No. Please hold. I'm having difficulties. All right. So back to this. It can also be used in character concepts, and we will talk about that as we go through this. Again, it helps create a fast focal point, and it also helps you make sure you're creating convincing depths and forms in a way that is informed by light that reads clearly. So let's get into it. So this is a LeBlanc piece for League of Legends for anyone who isn't League of Legends savvy. So as you can see, the heaviest blacks and the widest whites are put together on the form of LeBlanc, who's the lady in the middle with the scepter. So this contrast is what makes her the focal point of the image. But as you can see, you also have kind of a secondary read with her doppelganger, as in the colored version, you can see that she has red eyes, which kind of makes her a second read because the color of her staff is mimicked and then draws your attention to that area after you initially read her. Um, and as you can see, she kind of sits back a little bit more with just value. So color can also be introduced to kind of push and pull things a little bit more than you would normally look at. So moving on, this is by Loisa Chen. So this one I don't think is as strong because as you can see, the values are mostly middle grays. But for example, the reds in the frontal character help kind of pull him away from the similar value structure of the character behind him. And he does kind of have some great value contrast. So you have like his chest piece, which does create some shadows, and then in his pants, versus kind of like a lighter white, and also kind of the glowing hand he has. I don't play on Miyoji, so I don't know anything about this character. And also the back character kind of has a second read because, as you can see, he does have this kind of uh cold pink, and then that's also reflected back here with this character, which kind of draws you into them along with the rim lighting they have. So there's that. This is also a Loisa Chen piece, a little bit more colorful. So as you can see, the value structure, it doesn't have any super heavy blacks, but we are also still drawn to this character not because of just their color, but they also kind of have, these nice contrasted values, which aren't present in the background. So you may be sitting there and you might be looking at this and going, but the blues of the skeleton character are the same as the foreground character. But the reason why it sits back more is because the colors are closer together. So even though these blues are kind of the same as the stuff by your feet, it sits back more because it isn't combined with this darker purple that we see in the character. So in that sense, it sits back more because it doesn't have that pull of contrast that the character does have. Um, so you might be sitting here and going, well, these are all like splash arts and they aren't really character designs. So here we go. We're going into characters. So I do have a lot of Valorant examples. So this is Astra from Valorant. As you can see, all of the lighter colors are focused around her torso and face. That's because they want you focusing on the torso and face of the character rather than, hey, those are cool shoes. So usually in Riot games, just in general, Valorant, League, and otherwise, they have something called a value down on the like waist and under of their characters. And that's because, especially in like League of Legends, they want you to be focusing on the torso and the head of the character, uh, because I mean that's what you're honestly looking at for most of the game. Um, so there's that. Now you might be looking at Chamber and you might go, well, his mouse. You might be looking at Chamber and you might say, well, but his vest is darker than his pants. And that is true. But if you look, his pants don't have any great contrast in them. There's no real, like, interesting texture or anything that really pulls your eye to them, which is also kind of in reference to that value down structure. Is the emphasis isn't waist down, it's face and top up. So you do have kind of the contrasted textures here, which draws your eye, and of course the very bright pops of like pinks and oranges, and then this very vibrant cobalt blue, which pull you up to his face. And then that holds your interest to his face rather than looking at his kind of bleak shoes. Another example of this is Silco. Uh, Mouse, stop. So if you look at Silco, he has pretty much the same value structure throughout him, right? Because his coat and his pants are the same. But this is where kind of color sets things apart. So for anyone who's watched Arcane, he's pretty much a villainous character. And so we get that read not only from his strange eye and the pointiness and the closeness of his silhouette, but also the fact that he sports this kind of vile blood red, which isn't a friendly color, due to the coolness. So we read it as more of a cold, negative red instead. And also, your eye is just drawn to this area not just because of his white necktie, but because this red commands your attention, which then brings you up to his face area and then brings your focus to his torso and face, which is where honestly most of the action is happening. There's not really much going down here. I mean, there is still the red, but it's still not as commanding as this. So again, value downing, so your emphasis point is where you want it to be. This is another example. It's kind of more straightforward because it's Volibear, and obviously his face is a clear read even when he's hunched over, and that's because he has this whiteness compared to kind of these middle grays as you go down his body. And also, there's a contrast point because if you look, his ice spines are black opposed to his kind of white face. So that's another example of that, kind of more generalized. It's also still a clean read, because there's not really, I mean, he does have some stuff going on like his hair beads, but again, that's still on his torso, which is drawing you to his face and torso, which is what they want. So now we're going to move into color based. So a lot of these are actually based on a strong value. This is an example from Henry Matisse. So as you can see, he still also uses values uh, to kind of orient his colors. So kind of like going back into it, these colors can add an expression that isn't sold via just values. So this kind of adds an additional read and it can actually, add a little bit onto the piece. It's like the secret sauce. So the Fobs did this. Moving into more contemporary examples, this is Dominique Mayer. So as we're looking at this piece, it's a solid piece, right? You have the contrast on the figures. You can tell it's a tense scene with like trees breaking, and then you of course have the Dutch angle, which makes it tense. But when we add color, this adds a whole new element to it. Now you have mouse. So now you have this element of this bloody red sky, which adds to the tension because, again, like Silco, it's that cold red. It's not welcoming. It's, a negative red if you want to think of it that way. Um, it adds kind of like this anxiety, this anxious feeling to it. It's dangerous. You don't want to be there in that scene. You want to get out of it. So again, another example. So this is a cover of a comic, I believe, called Dylan Dog, and this is the 396th cover by Gigi Cave. So this is the value, obviously. You can tell the figure is stressed, right? No one's like standing around with their hands on their face and having a good time usually. Uh, Figures, they kind of like passed out around him, maybe they're drunk and passed out or something of that sort. So now when we move it to color, wow, he's really not having a good time. And wow, those people are actually dead or injured. So by adding those vibrant, bossy reds and oranges, again, they're not a positive color. And they add an energy, like it's anxious energy to the piece that you wouldn't otherwise have. And then the figures behind him also still kind of mirror that cold red, which also sells the fact that they're dead and not just passed out or they're injured. But it also adds kind of like to the negative connotation, especially paired with those cooler colors. So moving on, this is a professional artist by the name Ki Lee. They're on ArtStation. So I just paired these together because I think it's interesting to see how it reads differently. So with the colored version, you can see the blue and then the orange contrast, which really pulls your eye to it. And then usually these figures down here with the swords are a secondary read, with the deer being kind of a third read since it's pretty close to the colors in the forest, so it sits back more. But if you look at just the values alone, usually these would be the first read. The characters, statues, or whatever in the bottom are the first read because they have kind of this bright highlight with this super deep black of their face under the cloak. And then this character sits back a little bit more because she is more of samey tones. She does have a white, but there's no heavy dark blacks really on her. Um, so that's an interesting way that you can kind of read things differently as, from color to grayscale. So that's an interesting thing that you should take into account. And I also just noticed this little dog thing here, which is set apart from the ground with those kind of bluey teals that are mirrored throughout the ground, but it sits back because its values are pretty close to each other. They all are in pretty much the same value zones as the snow around it. So moving on, this is a Cosimo Galuzzi piece. So as we can see, there's nothing really remarkable about this value comp. I mean, yes, you have kind of blacks and then you have the whites on the snow, but you can't really, tell what this smoke thing is, where it's coming from, and you're like, all right, that's, a figure. Now when you add the warm versus cool contrast, that adds not only a focal point, but adds kind of a new interest into the piece that isn't sold just alone with these colors. Um, so, you're really drawn to this because everything else around it is kind of like this cool blue, and even these little rocks around here, even though they are orange, they're not a warm orange, they're a cold orange. Um, so moving on, you can add lines to it. So this is an example by Eliza Ivanova. So as you can see, the colors are more of a spectrum, and then the lines are just added to help add additional details or textures to the piece. This is a Katsuya Terada. Um, Again, lines are used to emphasize forms, kind of add some shadows or values, like in the hair here. They also add texture. You have, again, this bossy red, and then these little dragon things sit back more because yellow's inherent value it is closer to white than say a red. So these values next to the white are closer together, so they sit back a little bit more. And then just another example, Juliette Brocal. She does color her lines with more expressive colors that I do think fit and harmonize a little bit more with the piece. So if you want to do something that way, This is another example of ways you can combine lines into your art to kind of additionally sell textures and reads and other things. So, moving on, this is where things get a little bit heavy. So environmental factors play a large role in what colors you're choosing, what temperature, stuff like that. And there's a thing that we should all be paying attention to. It's called light fall off. So essentially, if you think of something, there's a light source, like say it's a lamp, and then as it gets further and further away from that lamp's light bulb, it gets, less and less intense. It's no longer this bright white light. And then as, those kind of like photons from the light, or, those particles that come from the light recede away from the light and, hit objects, obviously the part of the object that is faced closer to the object is what's going to essentially be the brightest part and most influenced by the light. And then it kind of peters off as it goes. Remember that different materials react differently. Metal and plastic don't react the same. Even, uh, kind of like a water bottle's plastic versus like a matte plastic, those also react entirely differently. Um, so, you might be asking, what is light fall off? Well, I have come prepared to slap you with examples. Alright, so if we look at this house, right, that has these bright, warm, yellowy lights on front of it, and then it kind of peters out into like, a little bit of an orange, and then it turns into this purple. And you might be sitting there and you might say, but why is it a purple? Well, essentially what's happening is these lights, as they go away, they go from a yellow to an orange to a red. So what's happening at the top of this house is you can see it has an orange, and then the rest is kind of moving into this cooler red. But when you have the sky that is also kind of bringing its photons down and informing the light we see, that combines with that purpley, darker red from the light to create kind of this nicer, warmer purple we're seeing. So, a simpler example of this is I found this on Pinterest, and these are kind of the colors I pulled from it. So, if you look, the candle lights or electric lights, I'm not sure what they are, start as this just really white, hot light, you know, and then it goes kind of like into a warm yellow. And then those light particles can only go so far and hit so many things. So as you move away, you start seeing this really, really warm orange. And then as less and less light is able to hit those planes, it slowly moves kind of into this purpley red as it goes down, from an orange to a purpley red. And even here, this is kind of a simpler example. This is I'm assuming a window out of frame, and it's a natural light, probably a cloudy day since it's not super yellow or warm. So you have kind of this cool cloud looking light. And then as you move back, it moves into purples or blues and purples as it recedes around and the light is no longer affecting it as much. Another great example of it is cars. Cars, it's a horrible idea to stare at cars as you drive past them on, an interstate or whatever, but it's really interesting to look at how a car moves and how the light around it moves and changes. So, at a dealership, the blue on the car itself isn't blue because obviously this is a red car, right? But the blue is coming from the sky. So the sky is, sending down its own photons and colors, and it's blue. So that's going to change the color of the car. Well, not, it's going to look different, which is why we get these blue highlights around the car. So that's the blue influencing it from the sky, which is also why water's blue. But as you move down further, the color of the car starts playing a little bit more in effect, which is why we get these purples as it moves away. And then areas that aren't, directly facing the sky are more of this actual, whatever red this car is. And then as it moves down, you can also see the shininess of this car also picks up on, this sidewalk or asphalt or wherever it's sitting on. And you can kind of see the way the car curves as the door curves in because this part isn't picking up as much as the white as, this part. Um, so that's another example of that. And you can see it, on green cars, blue cars, purple cars, yellow cars. Matte cars also act differently, so it's a really good, interesting way to like look at light and color as cars. Another example of this is kind of like your flesh. So think about how light is traveling through things as well, because obviously a bat's wing is just a thin membrane compared to our fleshy fatty fingers. So the way light comes through and looks through a bat wing is just kind of look like a frosted window, because honestly that's kind of what it is. And then as you can see, the more meatier parts of this bat reflect the red blood cells much like ours. So as you can see, there's the bright warm light. As it hits the finger, it's really bright, then it kind of turns to yellow, and then it hits kind of this reddish orange, which is informed by our blood, because our blood cells are red. So if you shine a light through it, you're going to see red, because hey, light's going to bounce off those blood cells and then color the other areas, that light is traveling through. So that's another thing to keep, kind of note of. Um, so this is Mark Bucci, which is actually where I got this idea from. So I'm actually gonna go to his ball example first. So, both are great. They're the same ball. The only difference is one has more color added into it. So if you look, as his light hits his shadows, it kind of has this yellowy orangey hue to it. And then as it goes into shadow, it doesn't just go straight into this purpley blue. Instead, it hits kind of like this, kind of like maroon, I want to say almost, or, cool purple. And this, of course, looks more lively than just having, straight kind of off yellow to a purple. So this put into action is the example he did. And this is an exercise you can do, is take a photo of something and then figure out, where's the light falling, and then where shadow meets light, you can add these kind of chromatic hints or tinges of color right before it hits shadow. And to push that just a little bit further is, if you notice, where these chromatic light fall off hit the shadow, it just doesn't go to shadow. There's a little bit of a reddish orange there. So adding in this light fall off next to your shadow, but also allowing that transition from the light fall off to hit into kind of continuous transition, into the shadow. It creates this nice kind of lively prismatic feeling um, to your artwork, which goes beyond just adding value. It adds a kind of nice, lively feeling to the piece. So, kind of a difference, another example of the difference between cool and warm. So, if we look at the left piece, even though he's smiling, he doesn't feel as welcoming as the guy on the right, right? Because he's swathed in more of a cool color. So, you have this white light and it's cool, and then that's about it. Instead, on the right, we have a guy who's lit by probably a warmer light. And then we have this kind of softer, lighter red, warm red shadow, which wants us, to, approach him. He's definitely more approachable than the guy on the right or on the left, even though he doesn't have the same welcoming smile. So, another important thing is to think about, if you're doing something for a different culture, to really think about the color theory of that culture, because colors aren't the same across cultures. This is just an example of wedding dresses from a few cultures. So, for example, in China, uh, you usually wear a red wedding dress as you first come out. I did read an article that said you can change to white after, but normally your first appearance is in red, and that's because red is the embodiment of joy and luck in China. So that's essentially, kind of starting off the marriage on a right foot and, enabling a lifelong thing of joy and luck in, the relationship you have with the other person. In uh, Morocco, which isn't on this because I couldn't find any good examples of it, they have yellow, and in their belief, that scares away an evil eye. They can also dress in green, which is the color of motherland and nature, which also brings good luck. For another example, Japan, they wear white lined in red most often, although in newer instances, I don't think this tradition has carried through. But a white dress lined in red is representative of happiness and then the new beginning. You are technically starting a new life with someone in some aspect. So it's kind of like that. For India, they have a bunch of examples because colors actually depend on which region you're from. So for some examples, you can have red or white with a red border or a combo of yellow, green, and white. It's just really colorful. And I don't think this article actually went into why, but they're a colorful culture. For Korea, traditionally it's a dress that is lime green and it can be embroidered with flowers and butterflies. And then depending on what bands of color you have across the dress means different things. So if it's banded with red, that's symbolic of paradise. If it's an indigo band, it's for, kind of like an earthliness. Yellow is for compassion. And then an additional kind of thing is usually their hands are covered in white because that's a symbolic thing for esteem. And then for Spain, so for, in the United States, usually black is a mourning color. Well, Spain kind of takes a twist on that. So they wear black gowns because it's representative of the bride's devotion until the partner dies, essentially. So it's a little bit macabre, but it's interesting seeing how all these different cultures look differently at wedding tradition and the ways colors influence wedding tradition. Uh, this isn't my favorite looking thing because it is very overarching, like you just have Western, Far Eastern, Indian, and Middle Eastern, where there's a lot more cultures than this. But this is kind of like an interesting look at just, the comparison of different things across different countries. Um, so yeah, usually in Western areas, red means excitement, danger, urgency, or love. Um, in India, it's purity. In Latin America, it's religious, especially if it is combined with white. For Middle East, it's danger and caution, and then in China, it's luck and happiness. And other areas like former Eastern European bloc countries, it is seen as it having associations with communism because obviously the USSR had a red flag with a sickle and that kind of thing. Um, for example, blue is also in Western. It's an example of safety and trust. It also represents masculinity and authority, loyalty and security. But in a lot of cultures, it often lacks a negative connotation. In Eastern cultures, it's seen as heavenly. It represents immortality and spirituality. In Hinduism, specifically, it's linked to Krishna, uh, which is the embodiment of love and divine joy. For Catholic population in Latin America, it's Mother Mary's mantle, so it's also religious, but it can also mean mourning in some areas. And I'm not gonna go through all the colors because I don't want to blast everyone with color. So moving on, color does have actual psychological effects that have been proven, although perhaps across different cultures that's not inherently true. I didn't look super deep into it, but some, basic examples are blue can actually lower blood pressure and slow respiration. And also, green can relieve stress and be soothing, although that is to a point, because evidently too much green can also lead to depression. Those are just two examples. Each color has their own psychology, but I don't want to get too far into that because that is a lot to read and take on. So moving on. So you may be asking, okay, colors. Yes, I understand colors. Colors mean things and they can be expressive, but why in the world is this important? Well, our jobs as concept artists is to clearly, concisely, essentially communicate a point and make sure our characters and props and environment fit the feeling and culture we're going for. And so, if you do spend the time to really look into what you're trying to preach in your art, that really helps create um, not only an informed piece, but you don't end up angering someone or angering the people you're trying to please with your art or represent in your art. So for example, also like talking about fall off, by paying attention to the way colors transition, it makes sure that you create a lively piece, that isn't just like old dead fine art masters. It elevates it into a new level of being because it's, adding new things to it. All right. Anyways, moving on. So we're going to talk a little bit about League of Legends again and their firecracker skins. Their older firecracker skins I don't think are as good or as researched. They seem to be more rule of cool, but the new ones, like this Diana skin, are actually fairly researched. So they are based on the Chinese New Year, at least last I checked. So you might be asking, well, why is she dressed in red? Well, red is the color that means luck and happiness, especially during the Chinese New Year. And it also has some ties to the Yan Beast legend, which I'll talk about with another League skin. Um, and then you might also look at her design, and you might see kind of this jade blade that she has. And you might be asking, what is the importance of jade? Well, jade is actually a very big, of very big cultural importance to Chinese culture. So essentially, jade is symbolic of virtue, kindness, wisdom, justice, civility, music, sincerity, truth, heaven, and earth. It's also a lucky charm in a sense, which fits into the New Year's kind of narrative because New Year's is all about luck and happiness. Um, so then moving on. This is Firecracker Set. So Firecracker Set is dressed as a lion or dragon dancer, and this actually kind of harkens back to the legend of the Nian Beast. So the Nian Beast was a Lord, stop. So this is a Nian Beast, for example. It's often a lion head with a sharp horn in the middle, and it is afraid of firecrackers and bright flares and the color red. Um, and essentially, the legend goes that this thing would rise out of the sea, terrorize the people, and then return and also eat their livestock and cause horrible damage to villages. So, an old celestial being dressed in red, was telling the villagers, I know how to take care of this thing. They didn't believe him, so they left the village on the day the Nian Beast was supposed to come, and he scared it off with by wearing red. He had firecrackers and a bunch of things that did actually scare it off. So when the villagers came back, he was like, "Hey, I did it for you." And then that's kind of the legend of how New Year's came to be. Um, so going back to Firecracker Set, he is dressed as a lion dancer, which is informed by kind of this hooded shape here. And also you can see another dancer, which also kind of looks like Ophelius, I'm not gonna lie. And then of course, harkening back to the legend, they have the firecrackers. He's dressed in red again, happiness and luck. And then also, gold is a representative of wealth and prosperity, and it's also the color of happiness, especially contextualized in the context of celebrations. Um, and then, of course, you have fireworks and other kind of things going on that say it's a New Year's celebration. Um, Moving on to Firecracker Shinzhao. He is dressed which in something that looks almost like a guardsman. He does have kind of a Yan Beast pauldron on his shoulder, and it's also red and gold again. Um, and then if you look at kind of like the shapes on his outfit, they're much pretty similar to either an old high-ranking individual, or it does have some aspects of kind of like an army man, especially with the fact that he is carrying a spear and has some armor on him. Also, his hair harkens back to I want to say Ming Dynasty, maybe a little bit earlier. Um, like in the Chinese drama in the bottom right, they did have long flowing hair, which he does have. So they obviously did their research. Again, they have a lion dancer behind him. Everyone is mostly in red and gold, and it reads as Chinese New Year. So, alright, we've seen enough about Riot Games. Let's move on. So this is a kind of a triangle and way of thinking put together by Carolyn Lim. So our principles are kind of the base fundamentals of everything. Everything fundies is important because fundies, you know, inform everything. So making sure you have a strong basis of fundamentals, and also figuring out what your intention is. Who are you making this for? What are they trying to convey? That sort of stuff. And then you move up into feel and story, which comes after. So what is the essence, of this art? Who is the character? Who is the environment? What is the environment? What is this serving a purpose for? Just kind of figuring out the deep ties of things together, which will help you inform your illustrations and designs. So this is an example of a kind of brief or breakdown. We did have a old meeting based specifically on this triangle and this process, which I can link later. But for example, you want to know what genre is it? You want to know what kind of market am I going for? Because children's art is very different from adult art. And then you want to figure out what is the character like. Um, so kind of moving on. So the brief is she was trying to make a sad sci-fi girl. So of course she wanted the visual language to be sad and droopy. Brain is dense and heavy. It feels like it might crack, like under pressure and it might burst. A feeling of weakness, so maybe they're floating. Um, Crying and headaches, so like a water element perhaps, heaviness from the head that goes down into the whole body, and maybe they're trapped in their mind. Um, this is something you can find on ArtStation. It's everywhere. This is an example of the silhouette. I, however, am going to move into something else. So let's look at how this is put into practice for other, concepts and designs and other things. So, first off, we have our stormtroopers. So as you can see, they've obviously are their armor's designed around basic human anatomy, which is informed by anatomy, which is informed from fundamentals. Um, and as you can see, they do read as kind of one unit. They're not individualized. They don't have colors. They don't even have a face. Um, and so, if you see one of these guys, they might, all right, that's a guy. I could probably take him. But them together is kind of scary. And the fact that they have no face kind of dehumanizes them. You can't read what they're thinking or feeling, and even though you can kind of read a face, it's not a happy face. It's a straight brow with a frown. And then also the fact that they're cold and white with only black joints. There's no color absolutely on them. And that kind of gives them a feeling of sterility. They act as a unit, they follow orders without questions, they get the job done when they're told to. Um, so moving on, this is Jake Neverland Pirates. And obviously this isn't made for adults. All the shape language is it's a super quick read. They have big eyes, all are kind of soft, which is kind of welcoming to children. And they're very clean cut, even though the character on the right has points, he still looks friendly and approachable, not like he's gonna stab you in the face. And also, there's a lack of weapons because, children probably shouldn't be thinking about stuff like that. So, on the other end of the spectrum, we have Pirates of the Caribbean. Very obviously not for children. Because, I mean, I'm pretty sure if I saw Davy Jones as a child, I'd be like, that's absolutely terrifying. Um, so I'm actually not super familiar with the story of Davy Jones, but I can still read kind of a little bit into his story, even though I don't know anything about this. If you look, there's, no real super bright, happy colors. They're all kind of earth colored. You can see that they're very obviously informed by sea creatures and things of the deep, like coral. Um, and then if you look, kind of like similar to the stormtroopers, all of them kind of form a unit. They all meld together into one person. It's kind of hard to say that's a guy and then that's another guy. Minus Davy Jones, who of course has the bright contrasting silhouette of his face against the kind of corally dark texture that fits in with everyone else. In terms of them being referenced, hey, those are pretty real looking tentacles. They look like coral people, and that guy looks like a hammerhead shark. Whoop de doo. And so there's that. And it does look like they rose from the sea, which I think was part of the story. Um, Anyways, moving on. Chief Bogo from Zootopia. As you can see in his storytelling, you can tell that he's been through some stuff. His ears aren't pristine, they're nicked. There's some damage to his horn, so he's definitely had, something happen which chopped off the left side of his horn. He may have a military background with the way he's standing, and he's not a very open character because if you look at his body, he's not open welcoming, he's closed off and, you know, in a strong pose. And then, of course, the strong pose is also helped by the fact that he is entirely composed pretty much of straight lines. And, of course, the rectangle silhouette. Um, so there's that. And also the fact that his eyes are red. Red is an intimidating color, especially if you're being stared at with red eyes. And then back to kind of the color theory thing, he's wearing a blue suit, and that's the color of a cop, and it's also the color of authority. Moving on, Shen. Shen is a fun character. He is entirely, or I should say, mostly composed of points. He's very obviously informed of a peacock because he is a peacock. Um, and then everything is pointy. His feathers are pointy. He has pointy pin feathers. His feet are pointy. Even his face is pointy. He has a pointed triangle. You have kind of like this triangular thing here. You got a pointy beak. He's not a friendly looking character. Also, in the fact that he's not colorful. The only color he has is this dark blood red that isn't welcoming at all. And kind of in the sense of this storytelling picture still from the movie, that's not a welcoming color, and for people who have watched the movie, you know that they are absolutely massacring the pandas. So, kind of that red adds to that tension of, oh my god, there's this horrible atrocity happening in the story. And then that is further sold by the fact that Shen is, an evil character. On the other end of the spectrum, we have this panda ribbon dancer. It's warm reds. It's very welcoming. Even this wood is a warm color. The grass is a warm color opposed to a cold green color. So that adds, a very welcoming feeling into this piece. And also the fact that her silhouette is open. She's almost like saying, "Hey, welcome to our village. Hope you like it." And then, of course, her design is informed by traditional Chinese dress. This is a older style of Chinese dress. I think it was even before the Ming Dynasty. And then she has kind of this Manchurian style headdress, which was pretty common in Chinese nobility of at least, the Ming the Qing dynasty. So there's that. Uh, this is an example from Jiang Jia. So obviously not made for children. If I saw those wolf foxes as a child, I would probably be terrified. This is a colder red mixed with a cold green. Cold greens read as this is venomous, this isn't friendly, this is villainous, and then that paired with that red adds to that additional read of wow, these things really aren't friendly, other than the fact that they're attacking horsemen. Um, if you also look behind them, nothing is really bright colored. It's all kind of murky and dark. And it's not welcoming, even though we have these orange bright lights in the people's eyes, it's almost an unnatural light, which makes it unsettling. So kind of moving on past that, this is another still from the opening of Jiangjia. So as we can see, he is clad in golds and a warm yellow, which is more friendly and reads as heroic, especially with the gold paired with it. His dress is informed from, traditional Chinese again, especially with the flowing sleeves and the way it lays on his neck with that collar, and then the chest plate that he has. Um, him being surrounded by this kind of evil red adds to the kind of tension not only of the piece, but the fact that wow, he's fighting this thing, Um, he's facing the villain of the series, because these flames were created by the villain of the series. Um, Third caption, this is at the end, when Ninetales gets pulled up into heaven to have heavenly judgment, and that's the only time you see this warm heavenly light shine down. And of course, in the fact that it's just after this war that was happening, it's still kind of a cold, desolate, unwelcoming landscape, but it's a little bit more welcoming with that addition of the gold and god rays that come down. So this is another professional artist by the name Emily Yina. So if we look at this portrait, wow, she's not friendly. She's unwelcoming. The blue is a very cold, blue that says hey, don't be here. Um, the snowy texture and the crystalline textures also additionally add to that kind of cold feel because, of course, with the cold comes snow, and then snow kind of can freeze and then create ice. So there's that read. And then also just the fact that, you know, she's just kind of staring there. It's not very welcoming. She doesn't have a smile, it's just kind of this dead-eyed glance of like, why are you here? Moving on, this is Bloom by Ross Straws, and very similar pose, and she's very happy almost to meet you. She's noticing you, looking directly at you, even though she doesn't have any super clear pupils. She's a warm pink, which is very welcoming. The blues are warm, which are really welcoming, and the fact that they're not crystals, they're butterflies, which are also friendly and soft. And then you also have the softness of the light behind her. So comparing the two again, um, you know, you would want to talk to Bloom instead of the creepy ice lady. Creepy ice lady is like, get out. You're not supposed to be here. Whereas Bloom is like, hi, tell me about your day. So that's just kind of an interesting way that colors can read differently across even portraits. Moving back kind of into Riot Games, this is Star Guardian Rakan and Zaya. So they don't read as heroic, even though Star Guardians are supposed to be heroic. The dark purples combined with kind of the cooler pinks is like, oh, that's not friendly. And then also, again, you have those cool greens, which are not friendly. They're often villainous. And then on top of that, you have all this pointy design language that exists in the piece, and their body language isn't open. I mean, Zaya's like, "Hey, look at my feathers," and then Rakan's like, "I'm gonna poke you with this." But as a whole, they're immersed in each other and not really saying, "Hi, how are you?" They're like, "Go away." So there's that, and also the fact that they're obscured in shadow. If you want a character to be shady, make them shady, quite literally. So there's that, and then uh closing up, uh, remember that fundamentals are important. and no amount of making things pretty will fix a foundational error. So, case in point. And I rest my case. For anyone who is confused, I mean, the colors are really nice. You know, perspective is nice, figures are nice, except the fact his arm is backwards. So there's that. I hope I didn't absolutely blast everyone awfully.
I think you did. Martin just said still recovering.
Oof. Well, if you look at his hand, you know, there's no way you can physically twist your hand and your forearm to make that work. At least not comfortably.
So for that image, I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be like his hand is going backwards. It's still not really comfortable to do or anything, and still looks like wrong. But I think I kind of know what the artist is shooting for. And also, in regards to the Star Guardian thing, good job nailing those colors, because Zaya and Rakan are the two Star Guardians that are evil in the universe.
And Zoe.
The guy whose hand is going backwards, it's kind of like the position you do if you carry a suit
Like a
jacket
jacket.
over your back. Yeah, it's the same hand position. It's just that he's holding a bottle. Like, you could do that. Like, yeah, I'm doing it right now. I've got a bottle and I'm holding it like that. It's just really weird. It's not comfortable, but you can do it.
If anyone wants an aneurysm, have a look at all the tabs I have open. It used to be more.
Oh, I can top that. I can top that easily.
Yeah, I had like 30 tabs open when I was researching a project and this, so that was interesting.
I have like 30 tabs open at most times. My phone has like 72, and I don't even look at them. I couldn't even tell you what the articles are anymore.
Oh, I don't even know how many tabs I have open on my phone. I probably should.
Tessa, you reminded me of something with some of the screen caps that you were showing that like I forget to do a lot, where coloring, like designing colors for characters also need to like look well with the environment that you're designing. Like
Yeah.
I know I'm like saying it again, but I went to Irie Pan's concept lecture last year, and she said that she designed like some of her characters to be orange for honey, and then she designed the environment specifically to be cools and blues because she knew the characters stand out against the environment, and that like blew my mind. Like I was like, you can do that? I'm like, yes, you can.
That's like big brain right there.
Right? Like, but it seems so obvious when someone says it. It's
yeah,
like, why haven't I been doing that? You know?
And I think it's important that when you like decide to put a character in your environment, like that you can fuck with their colors like a bit just to make it look nice within the piece.
Yeah,
things
like
cold, things warm.
You can do that with like overlays.
That's what I'm saying.
I could pull up an example of that because I have done that. I'm just gonna drag it into another slide because that makes my life easier because I don't have to reshare.
I'm about to post something in the voice text. Like I know people have seen this image, me use it like a bajillion times, but I'm doing it again. I don't care. She designed the characters to be like orange, and since this is an open world game pitch, the world is mainly blue, and it's just like so smart. Blue with dashes of orange, and it like
that's big brain right there.
It's so smart. Like the palettes work together.
Just to connect this to the concept sheets for this whole piece, because there's a shit ton of them, are also really awesome. All of the layouts that Ari Pan does,
gorgeous. She released a new project this week, and it's melting my brain. It's so good. Well, you should look it up. The layouts
I will look it up.
gorgeous.
Is it
Here,
on
I
our
can just
website?
put the link here. Yeah, I can just throw the link in here. This is the new project.
It amazes me how often you and I have like the top favorite, like the same favorite artists and whatnot.
Yeah.
No, I did see this. Yeah, I saw this on Instagram.
cool.
Yeah, this is fucking awesome.
Oh, this thing! I love this.
Yeah.
I
I
didn't know
saw
it was
some
Ari.
sketches from this earlier. Yeah, this is so cool.
Oh my god.
So
Me and
Yeah.
Joy were like talking earlier today about it. And just like I like how it's like an event, a new Airy Pan project.
Yeah, she's
New
working
Airy
at
Pan
Blizzard.
project just dropped. Who does?
yeah, she's like a super professional.
yeah, no.
She's
like,
the
she-
senior concept artist at Blizzard. So
Yeah.
a senior concept artist.
All I'm saying is everyone's talking about Kendrick's new album. Why isn't anyone talking about Airy Pan's new project? You know?
That's what I'm saying.
Exactly.
Yo, new Airy Pan world building project just dropped.
Oh,
Don't miss it out. You gotta slurp this up. Come on.
I've converted everyone.
It's so good. I love Airy Pan.
yeah,
I
like,
know.
even looking at this, like if we're gonna break down color, it's very blue. Blue and purple is the main thing,
Oh my god.
which reads as cold, like you're not welcome there. And the fact that the figures, their hands aren't super visible, so you're like, oh, what do they have? Closed silhouette, and also the fact that they're looking down at you. Obviously they are the people who own the manor. They don't want you there, stuff like that.
Yeah. No, I think not only that, but in that one like narrative screenshot where it's very warm.
Yeah. I was just looking at that.
It's like uncomfortable. It's like I love when people take worms and they flip them. Cause like I was mentioning it earlier up. We were talking about like yellow in the comments. And like yellow can be decay, yellow can be death, yellow can be like a lot of really bad things too, which is something that like you don't always go to yellow as your first pick for that. But going towards those worms in like an uncomfortable way is really interesting.
Yeah, and like it's so sorry.
No, please. Go ahead.
So, oh my god, when I saw this and like if you take out the text on this piece, it could have a completely different meaning where it's kind of like a Pride and Prejudice, like, oh my god, this is such a pretty screen cap. But then you add the text and it flips it. There's almost like a contrast between like the really creepy, like almost eerie, like worms and just like the messaging being like, oh, leave. Like it's almost like, oh wait, am I not supposed to be here? Like the manner is like pulling you in. It's so good.
This is
it's so cool.
I love
Before I go, something that Will was talking about, warm yellows push towards happiness and like bright, the good things. But that cool yellow is something that Ahmed Aldori in one of his like skin painting videos talks about. If you ever want to make an evil character, give them like a cool yellowish skin tone, and bam, they're evil.
I think warm yellows can be evil if you're not using like high values. Like dark warm yellows, like mustard color, that's just mad evil.
Yeah,
true.
That shit's gross.
I got it, y'all. It was fun.
See ya.
It's hot out. Don't walk.
Don't walk. I agree.
That's what I was saying. I thought I was going to take a walk earlier, and then I walked outside. I was like, not today.
I walked back from Monty, and I got drenched, and then I took a 2-hour nap. So, I agree. Don't walk.
I do think the creepy read, like beyond just the it's simple, just don't leave, is also the fact that they're obscured in shadow. The light you see is coming from behind them, and also the fact that the moth maid doesn't have a face. Like you can't read what she's talking about other than the fact that she has a smile, but you can't tell if it's like a happy smile or like a creepy smile.
Yeah, especially like covering the eyes immediately puts like everything into question, because you just can't get a read as to like, oh, are you like, do you mean this sincerely? It's like kind of like when people lie and you can immediately tell when someone's lying because of eye contact and like how they're like moving their eyes around, like if they can hold the eye contact with you. Yeah.
Yeah, I hope I did answer people's questions.
Oh yeah. Does anyone have any
Yeah,
questions? Do we ask? If anyone has
question.
anything,
We're getting towards the end, so definitely like
Any questions?
mustard.
Or, like,
I love mustard, dude. I love warm yellow. I love yellow. Period. I use a lot of yellow.
Tessa, you killed it. That was awesome.
Yeah, that was fun. Good presentation.
sick. I mean, I feel like I do think of. Wow, hold on. Uh, I do think
You're in post presentation
I should have
like
talked about
crouch.
like inherent color values because across the color wheel, warmer colors like yellow and orange have inherently lighter values than purple and blue. But color selection in general. So a good way to like think about color is like what are you going for? So for example, in this piece I just pulled up, it's I didn't want it to be welcoming, right? It's an evil altar that sends you into a planar zone that hurts you. Um and so finding a way
I
like
sometimes go into the planar zone.
a good way to like set up a really fast kind of like exercise is find a color palette, like think of a feeling you're going for, find a color palette and just draw like a scene, you know. There's also the kind of like going back in the presentation, this example, so if you want to play with light fall off, like playing with things as they move away, so like making things darker as they move away from like a warm light source, make them cooler reds as they move away, kind of that thing. There are also links in the notes I will be posting for this that have some additional links for stuff ish.
Also, a little note on that too. Anyone here who's an environment artist, color palettes are going to be very largely dependent on the time of day of the environment you are making. Like that's just kind of you can't really if you're doing exterior environments or landscape paintings, you can't really invent things. It's kind of like what time of day is this and how am I going to sell my story? That's kind of more important.
Also, to build off of that, so pulling a little bit on like traditional fine art planar painting, try and pay attention to like what season of the year it is, because if you're in winter, your yellows aren't gonna be as warm, and you know, kind of stuff like that. Like there are actual hard fast rules of colors in seasons if you really want to get technical.
Yeah.
Let me just give y'all like some really good food. This is Marion Lowe. They're I think they're a viz dev artist for Netflix, animation. Their whole page is just like you can find them on Instagram, and that's where like most of their work is. This is just their website, but like, oh my god, it's all just like good viz dev color, like not really like full paintings, just like here are good color palettes that are like very quick to get like scenes down. Really cool stuff.
Also,
Yeah, this is awesome.
if you aren't like super sure about color palettes, if you have a piece of artwork you like, you can definitely cop the color palette from it. It's something I do
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah. Colors are free.
Colors are free.
Colors are not copyrighted.
Except Vanta Black.
Wait,
Isn't there
really?
like a new white too? Like a new super white?
Maybe. Vanta Black is like owned by someone, but that's like a physical color, so that's like a product.
Oh yeah. Helio art.
For real.
Didn't they come to SCAD? They came to SCAD last quarter, I believe.
That guy? Or person?
Helio art. I think they came to SCAD last quarter for an illustration society meeting. Yeah.
Dang.
The Maxwell Bose presentation this week was pretty awesome. I enjoyed.
Maxwell Boas. I think I might head out. I gotta go do some stuff.
All right. Have fun, Will.
Sounds good.
Yeah. I gotta
So,
take a shower. That's the big one.
to answer your question, unsafe voodoo.
But I'll catch you guys.
Bye, Will.
Bye.
See you, Will.
Great meeting, Tessa.
Thanks. To answer your question, I would recommend doing it traditionally. Like, I know that's an unpopular answer, but traditional allows you to kind of. I mean, I'm painting minor. I find it easier for me because there's a tactile quality that I miss in digital, and I mean, it's a lot about kind of thinking about base colors and kind of like I am trying to like explain. All right, let me just pull up a project I also did last quarter, which was a portrait. So if you're going for like fleshy tones, Gardner tells us specifically, alizarin crimson. If you're going for a cool flesh tone, ultramarine blue, yellow ochre, and uh, uh, not Windsor green. It's a green. I'd have to look at my bag. But figuring out like I think it's just a study thing cuz even for this I'm not like super set on it. But figuring out like places you get like rosy things like the nose, the cheeks, the lips, those are usually things that are warmer because there's like more blood vessels, I think is the thing.
Yeah.
Um like always remember like eyes are kind of like inset, so you're going to get heavier shadows under the brows and then you're going to get lighter as the eyeball pushes the eyelid closer. And try and also think of like the light source. So if it's like a warm light, push your shadows into like an ultramarine blue or um I guess even like a perylene violet, which is uh shoot, the red color on mouse, the red color on the jacket here. So like I honestly like I mean I'm a big person who vouches for traditional art because if you are trying to copy like a traditional style in digital art, it just really helps to get brush hours in that actual medium to mimic the medium. And there's just a way it layers that I don't think you ever get in digital. And I still do have disconnects with digital for that reason. But never use like in digital, I'd say never use like an achromatic black and an achromatic white. Always make sure there's some color play in those because black kills any like it's just muddy, black is muddy. And then if you have just a straight white and digital, it's very what's the word? Uh it's cold. It's not lively.
Yeah.
So like I know for like some oil painters when they paint skin, they only use Naples yellow for, skin tones because it avoids the chalkiness you get with, a white paint. Um so like making sure you're not just using like something yeah, even like that, even though she's in a cool light, her flesh is, lightly blue. And if you don't want to like directly paint on it and you prefer to use layers like I do, use, if you have like a bunch of different colors, like for this piece, I just literally slapped a blue color over everything. His belt, his
Yeah,
dagger, his medal. I threw it over everything. And I just painted over, the areas that needed light after. And that really harmonizes your colors together if you prefer working that way.
I would
Um,
recommend that pack. Like starting with the local skin color, putting an overlay layer of whatever lighting that you want to be hitting that skin, and then working in like your foundational knowledge of like this area of the skin, like around the nose and around the cheeks and underneath the eyes. There are going to be different hues. Like some are going to be warmer, some are going to be cooler, and kind of just painting it out. It's going to take practice, like the face. And yeah, I do too. Like the face is definitely one of those that is the hardest to paint and get all of the hue changes right. I know there's a really good Proco, and I think there's a really good Cynics video too about painting skin tones.
I
And
think
I think both of them, they use like a lot of palettes. Like they like take their local color, they put a swatch down, and then they like make it a little bit cooler, put that swatch down, make it warmer, put that swatch down, and then they have a bunch of swatches and they can always refer back to it. So that might help.
there is like just a skin tone palette that like floats around on the internet somewhere, and it's like you pick any color and it's an instant skin tone or something like that. So that might help too. I,
Flesh
ooh,
cloud.
I hate that, but yeah, kind of, yeah. That's what it is.
Dark Souls boss, the flesh cloud.
Isn't that just like an amygdala at that point? Like, let's face it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that thing, a good boy.
Oh, I've never seen that.
Really? I've seen it
Yeah.
everywhere.
Just add some eyes to
Add
it.
some eyes and some like flesh boils, and bam, Dark Souls.
Every like round edge has like an arm poking out.
Ugh.
Yeah, I've seen that one. I've seen the
I've
cubes.
never seen that one.
Doing like a ball, like doing like painting like a ball of your local skin color and kind of rendering it out before you do the face would also really help. I mean, you can do that for every single material. Like, I just thinking of skin as a different material to paint might also help, because when we look at humans, we like overcomplicate it and we're like, oh, there's like so much stuff that's like an eye and that's like a nose, but really it's just like skin is just a different material. It's like the same as if you're painting leather or if you're painting cloth. It's a material that you need to like learn how to paint.
Yeah, it's also very like you don't think about this, but it's like very transparent, kinda. If you like, I would honestly say like also just like do studies and like
Yeah,
do studies from like Sam does art, Ross draws. Uh, I mean, if you want like less natural skin tones, like you could go Emily Yena, who's the person who did like the creepy ice lady.
yeah, I agree. Do studies.
Honestly, studies is the name of the game. I need to do
Studies
studies.
is the name of the game. Yeah, I think we all need to do more.
I've just been like dying so hard for my three classes this quarter. I haven't. If I'm not
Yeah, I
sleeping, I'm
mean,
working.
no, it's true. It's hard when we're here to have time for that. Like I barely made it through plain April. I only did six, and like I barely made it.
Yeah, I mean, it
I think over
depends.
the summer. I think over the summer will
Yeah,
be fine.
I only have like 2 months during the summer, so but I'll work it. To answer your question, Ink, you can do a study for that. Like if you like say I want to do a study of this, what you could do is you could trace the figure so you don't have to worry about like making sure the eyes are right and all that, and then just work solely with color and value. And I will say like I mean even though like tracing is kind of like taboo in some scenarios, like Gardner's class. I mean, I can draw faces after, and I'm like kind of impressed because, it just, by taking out aspects that you don't need to focus on other things helps you kind of like figure out those things faster because you're worrying about less things to deal with, if that helps.
100%. Like, don't waste the time. If you're not like trying to study how to draw that thing, like, yeah, don't waste the time.
Yeah, like I can't tell you how happy I was when Gardner was like, "You can project stuff," and I was like, "All right, sick."
I would also recommend whatever you do, like whatever you do a study of, like apply it. Like do it's always like a two-step process, like doing a study. Like let's say you're planning on doing a piece with a certain lighting, doing a study of how that lighting is used in a really like good way, and then applying it to your piece right after is like the fastest to like learning and internalizing that.
And also having a clear intention. Like, so I know I speak a lot about the painting department and how much I didn't enjoy their instruction. And that was mainly because we had 5 1-hour paintings per project, and that we had to create our own direction, but they didn't tell us to have a specific direction. Um, so when you have a study, say, all right, I'm going to sit and I'm going to focus on color fall off or light fall off, or I'm going to sit and I'm going to focus on how to draw an eye, or I'm going to focus on drawing forms, stuff like that. Because if you don't have a clear, direct path you're trying to achieve, it's a good recipe for burnout.
Yeah.
I haven't
No.
had a class talk about photo bashing. It's something you
Nope.
kind of have to teach yourself at SCAD for some
I think
reason.
the closest in the concept for animation in games class, really. Huh.
Oh
In the
yeah,
concept
yeah.
for animation
He
in games class, there's a do the image that Yanni used to do. Oh, I'm like blanking on what it was called. Like where you like it like merges a bunch of like it's like AI. It takes a bunch of photos and textures,
Oh,
and
deep
then you
art.
paint over it. Deep art, yeah, you do like deep art environment paintings. That's like the closest, I think, at least here in illustration.
So I'm gonna turn off the recording now.
When did Peter Anitz make you photo bash?